All right, welcome to the Acres USA podcast. This is our 100th episode, and I just want to start by saying thank you to everyone who's been listening, sharing, supporting what we are building here. This podcast has always been about getting real information into the hands of farmers, ranchers, and land stewards, and we couldn't do it without you. I'll be the first to say I'm not the expert in all of this. What I try to do is bring on people who are and people with real experience who are out there doing the work, figuring things out, and willing to share what they've learned. And I truly believe Acres USA has some of the most valuable information available in agriculture today. When you look at what's happening right now with fertilizer prices rising, more pressure on farmers, tighter margins, it's clear the system is getting harder to operate in. The biggest lesson I've learned through this podcast and through owning acres is this: we have to think differently. We have to find ways to remove ourselves as much as possible from the constraints the systems put on farmers. At the end of the day, we are all entrepreneurs. And if we stay inside the guardrails of big ag, we're playing an unfair game. So the goal is to find your unfair advantage and use the knowledge that's out there to build something better. Acres is a for-profit business in a space where most companies like us are nonprofits, and that forces us to operate differently. We only succeed if we provide real, useful, tactical information that actually helps you. This company exists because of farmers, because of you, just like your businesses succeed by providing value to your customers. We hope you find real value in what we provide. We are the ones willing to think differently. We are the innovators, and we are building the future of the kind of agriculture a thriving country actually needs. So thank you for your continued support. I'm excited about the direction Acres is heading, bringing more valuable resources to all of you. Please continue to support us, and we'll continue doing everything we can to deliver the best information possible. And I hope to see you at one of our events this year. Now, for the 100th episode, it is one I've been looking forward to. We are going to be joined by Mollie and Ryland Engelhart of Sovereignty Ranch in Bandera, Texas. And we are also announcing and talking through the event that we're hosting together called American Regeneration that's happening May 1st and May 2nd in Bandera. This is going to be a boots-on-the-ground gathering on a working regenerative ranch, bringing together farmers, ranchers, and leaders from across the country to talk about soil health, food systems, and what the future of agriculture actually looks like in practice. You're going to hear about the land, the story behind Sovereignty Ranch, the bigger vision behind American Regeneration, and why gatherings like this matter right now. So with that, we'll get into the podcast, and I hope and pray that all of you have an amazing growing season. Howdy, eco farmers. Welcome to the Acres USA podcast, a conversational podcast where we will explore sustainable farming, real-world regenerative practices, and the latest innovations and technology shaping the future of ecological agriculture with some of your favorite farmers and ranchers. This episode of the podcast is proudly supported by Azure Standard and American Farmland Trust, two organizations that are deeply committed to strengthening farms, building healthier food systems, and promoting land stewardship across the country. I'm your host, Taylor Henry, the owner and CEO of Acres USA. Now let's get into today's conversation. All right, we are joined with Mollie and Ryland Engelhart from Sovereignty Ranch. We are hosting a event at Sovereignty Ranch May 1st through the 2nd in Bandera, Texas. We'd love for you guys to come. We're going to talk about that a little bit today and how we came about planning this event. So Mollie and Ryland, welcome to the Acres USA podcast.
Thank you so much for having us.
Thank you, Taylor. Appreciate it.
I know we've had you on a couple times, Mollie, and is there any updates on the farm that you want to share? What are you guys kind of working through right now? Anything new, cool, exciting that you've done since we last talked?
What are we? We're just it's spring. We're getting cover crop, forage crops in the ground and moving cattle every day. Bunch of babies being born everywhere you look. It's just spring on the farm. No major updates but yeah, we still grow our produce and our meat for our restaurant that's here on the ranch, which is a special experience for people to drive 3 miles on a dirt road through a ranch to get to a restaurant.
Yeah. We just expanded the whole market in the restaurant. So now there's like 4 freezers now. So we just got, processed
8
pigs,
hogs, and we got 6 cows going.
Bacon
so
is back.
bacon
The
is
vegans got bacon back.
people probably
It
don't.
won't last for long. That's the number one comment always with people that get pigs is, "Where's all the bacon at?"
I know, because everybody buys the bacon and then you have like thousands of pounds of sausage that you have to discount so you can go process more pigs so you can get the bacon back.
Yeah. Well, I'm jealous of you guys being in Texas. So we had 70 degrees here Monday, and then Sunday we're going to get 24 inches of snow.
Goodness.
And it's supposed to be -5 on Monday. So
We're praying we don't go below freezing because all of our peaches are in bloom or already have small fruit set. All of our apples already have fruit set. Plums and mulberries, everything is fruit set or just flowering. And it's threatening to go below freezing to Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday night, which would be a catastrophe. It would mean no fruit for the farm this year.
man.
So
And you
we
guys,
are.
and you had a rough stretch of weather earlier in the winter too, where you actually froze up for quite a while, huh?
Yeah, we did. And it's the weird thing about Texas, and I'm new to Texas, this is my third year here. Nothing is built as if it freezes. So water lines are all above ground. My well house is literally next to the well head. I don't know. I'm from New York where the well head is inside of the well house. But basically, we've got this whole infrastructure that we inherited from the people who bought it, that nothing is built. And even Ryland's house, which is brand new, built right now, froze. The kitchen sink pipes froze in the wall. So nothing's built insulated enough for a deep freeze because they say it never freezes here. But when it does, it's just a catastrophe. It took my husband all day, the first day, just to get all the animals water. Just he had to use torches to get the hydraulics working on the tractors, and I'm sure that you guys have to deal with those kind of things, but there's no antifreeze in our tractors or whatever because it doesn't freeze very often.
Yeah, we're more prepared for it and we're used to it, but yeah, it's weather has been we're experiencing some weird stuff this year too. I mean, 70 degrees earlier this week makes you think it's going to be spring, grass is starting to get green, and we're going to get dumped on with a bunch of snow. It's too bad. For Ryland, so you've never been on the podcast before, but you want to give a little bit of an introduction on how you have, worked with Mollie in the past, and his brother and sisters, but how you've gotten into this world and how you've ended up forming the organization American Regeneration.
Sure. Yes. We were born on a old dairy farm in upstate New York, and our parents were homesteaders. Brothers married twin sisters. We all lived in one household, one bank account, sort of hippie back to the landers. And so we grew up with orchards and vegetables and gardening, and that was our life. My folks started a restaurant called Cafe Gratitude, which was one of the first vegan, organic, actually raw food restaurants in the Bay Area. And then that went to LA, and we ended up opening 15 restaurants over 20 years and serving millions of organic, plant-based meals. And so, similar to Mollie and Sage and those that have heard her story, we were very in the most ethical way to be in the world is to eat plant-based, eat vegan, eat a vegetarian diet. And so that was sort of our religion, our life. And we did that started in the Bay Area in San Francisco in 2004. We opened our first restaurant. And again, it wasn't just a restaurant. It was also, it was called Cafe Gratitude, and it was all about creating a culture of gratitude, a culture of love, transformation, sort of some of those hippie ideals that were from our childhood coming into this business. And so we did that for, we still have 2 restaurants open in Los Angeles under the name Cafe Gratitude and Gracias Madre. And so, that was my life. My life was serving food, but really it was this vision of, our family has always been somewhat visionary in that we're always trying to create something that makes the world a better place. And so that was, we started in the Bay Area, and then we brought our restaurants to LA. And that was sort of this, I would say, an sort of an evangelizing mission of that we were trying to change the world by bringing plant-based food and gratitude to Los Angeles, the belly of the beast, and that we were gonna, we had a business model called sacred commerce. How do you create love in the exchange of selling goods and services and create this transformational ripple in the world, and that we were going to create a new business model. And so that was sort of my early 20s into my early 30s, was creating these businesses, growing these businesses from the Bay Area to Los Angeles. And that led me to going to a trip to New Zealand, actually to a big health and wellness conference in Auckland. And I met a guy by the name of Graham Sate, which I think Mollie also referenced him as, somebody who is a transformational sort of wake up moment. But yeah, basically there was a panel called Can Human Beings Sustain Life on Planet Earth? And 5 out of the 6 experts said no. And he said, what they're saying is true, that we are heading into an Anthropocene, that human activity is creating a lot of destruction all across the planet. And yet there's a blind spot in the equation, and that blind spot is soil. And that blind spot is regeneration, that human beings' management of land can actually go beyond sustaining life, but can actually regenerate what we've destroyed. And as someone who'd been sort of a serial optimist of always looking for what is the transformational catalyst that's going to make the world a better place, and always trying to get behind whatever that transformational idea was, the idea of regeneration, and this is probably in 2012, 2012, and basically it was like this, what I call a revelatory moment, where it was like, oh my God, this is the good news that I've been waiting for my whole life, is the pathway of how life can get better for humans on planet Earth. Because even in all of my sort of vegan fervor and sustainability, and we were the first to have paper straws, and we were the first to be composting all of our food waste in our vegan restaurants, those efforts felt light in the loafers as far as the reality of what they were going to bear fruit on and create healing or transformation, or creating a better world. And so when I discovered this moment in New Zealand, it was like, oh my God, this became my new evangelism, my new sort of awakening, what I wanted to shout from the rooftops. And so I came back to our vegan restaurant chain at the time, I was living in Venice, California, running a restaurant in Venice, California called Cafe Gratitude. And I started, part of my table conversation with the guests was I started engaging them about, do you know about soil health? And at the time, it was actually largely about climate change and, soil being a solution for climate, that we could put too much carbon that's up here and we can put it down here. And by doing so, we can grow healthier food, et cetera, et cetera. But, as I kind of started to evangelize and tell that story, and starting to interact and find out who practitioners, meeting Alan Savory, meeting Ray Archuleta. We brought Alan Savory and Ray Archuleta to California to speak at an urban soil summit, and this is in probably 2014 or 15, and really the whole objective was, I had an awakening. How do I have other people have that same awakening? That awakening that regeneration is possible. There is no real vantage point of good news for the future when we look out to the future and we kind of look at, what are we being sold is going to have life get better. There's sort of an illusion. There's like technology is going to save us, or we got to pray and believe in God and that faith somehow it's going to work out. But as far as like, what are the actions, what are the virtuous actions of life that we could be taking that would shape a better world? It seemed like there wasn't much. And so this idea of regeneration became, and kind of the vision was, if people as human beings, and I've heard Mollie say this as well, like if we can envision and see ourselves that we belong here, that we are part and parcel of this beautiful tapestry of life, and that there's a keystone role for us to play in this ecosystem, and that is facilitating this regeneration. What an amazing, beautiful, purposeful existence to be alive as a human being. And so that really became the mission of Kiss the Ground, which was the first nonprofit that I started in my garage with my good childhood friend Finian Makepeace. Was this nonprofit that the whole mission was to awaken people to the possibilities of regeneration, that was possible for the human species to be part of a regeneration versus a degeneration. And so, we produced a couple films. Kiss the Ground, Common Ground. Kiss the Ground came out on Netflix in 2020. It took 7 years to make that film. And, it was kind of a moment of awakening of that idea that we had in such an isolated little moment in New Zealand with Graham Sate, and then started, building this organization in a garage, and then having this film come out on Netflix and 10 million people seeing it, and it being used all over the world to communicate this idea was, on some level, a fulfillment of this, 10-year vision, coming true. And so, that was kind of the first chapter of it. And then
what was the process like making that documentary? Because I would say it's probably top 2 most popular documentaries on regenerative ag.
Yeah.
7 years.
Yeah. I mean, it was, the process was, essentially building community and building a community of resources that allowed it to happen. Like I mean, it was miraculous too. Like I moved into a house in Venice, and the people who were moving out were the 2 filmmakers, the directors who ended up making the film. I met a guy at Cafe Gratitude who said, "You got to meet this guy, Pedro Denise in Brazil." And I got on a Zoom call with him, and 2 Zoom calls in, he writes me $100,000 check to invest in the film. We grew up as childhood, Woody Harrelson lived in the same neighborhood as our parent, or my mom.
My mom and her twin sister
in Hawaii, because she grew the good ganja, and the neighborhood was like, or Woody came in and was like, well, who's got the good ganja in this neighborhood? And Auntie Jean or Virginia's got the good. And, ultimately that was 25, 30 years ago. And so we've been knowing his family, and our cousin was his daughter's first boyfriend. And when I got the idea to make this film, I was like, we needed to raise money. So I was like, Woody, would you do the voiceover for the narration? He thought I was going to get him to do some vegan thing. And he actually said yes without even knowing that the whole narrative had changed. And a lot of people were like, why did Woody Harrelson, as a vegan, do the voiceover for like one of the most prominent regen film talking about cows being, it's not the cow, it's the how. But that was ultimately just him saying yes to a family friend who he really had no idea what he was saying yes to. But ultimately he became engaged and enrolled in the vision of it, and that it was a viable mission, and
has become a voice and shifted his voice in some ways from the vegan conversation to the regenerative conversation.
And I was just in Austin with him, 2-3 weeks ago, recording the VO for the 3rd film, Groundswell, there was Kiss the Ground and then Common Ground, and then Groundswell is coming out in May, the 3rd sort of piece to this trilogy. And it's going to be released at a film festival in actually France called Cannes Film Festival, and then going to be released at the Tribeca Film Festival in New York.
How can folks, because you came out with a Common Ground Farmers Cut that we showed at EcoEgg this year. How can
That's
people
right.
watch that?
Yeah, so basically, both Kiss the Ground and Common Ground have educational cuts more geared towards students and farmers. And so, yeah, we've put a lot of time into the Common Ground Redux cut, which is what we showed at Acres, and it's really designed for farmers. And it's available. There's a commonground.com and then / or there's a tab for farmers, and it's free to download for anybody. And if there's any orgs such as Acres or other orgs that are communicating and promoting, sharing information with farmers, it's a totally free asset. So if you want to host that film on your website or host a screening or just help promote it and distribute it, we're always looking for partner organizations to share that film out. It's 45 minutes and it's really just inspiring and compelling and farmer stories of their success in implementing regenerative ag.
Hey all, here is a quick note from one of our sponsors, American Farmland Trust, who leads the conservation agriculture movement, focusing on the land, the practices used on that land, and the farmers and ranchers who steward the land. Working from kitchen tables to the halls of Congress, AFT's mission is to keep farms and ranches thriving. Since its founding in 1980 as a membership-based organization, AFT has helped permanently protect over 8 million acres of agricultural land, advance regenerative farming practices on millions of acres, and supported thousands of farm families. Find technical resources, network opportunities, and more at farmland.org. Yeah. So you guys were operating separate restaurants in California.
Yes.
Yep.
And
Totally different. I was like farm to table vegan food that was more comfort food. Like my original goal was, if we want people to eat less meat, because that was my conversation that I was in, that it has to be accessible and it can't just be like kale and quinoa with a tahini dressing, like that nobody's going to go from McDonald's to that. And so I had really comfort food, full bar, and beer garden, and it was really just, I think I was like one of the very first that did like buffalo cauliflower in the way that it is now everywhere at California Pizza Kitchen and wherever. But and just really, really rich and delicious comfort food, and always farm to table, prioritizing like local farms. And they were really like the cleanest food, and raw. It started raw, and then they implemented some cooked food, but didn't have fried food till like close to the end. And so we were very different, and they were really into the messaging. And I grew up in that whole abundance, gratitude messaging hippie, and so did he, but I rejected it a little bit. I'm a little more like grounded and just like I don't need an affirmation with my food. I just want to feed people. And so we had totally different, and for years we were both really successful at the same time. And people would say, "What is it? Do you and your dad talk?" And I'd be like, "Of course we talk." In fact, my dad calls me almost every night and says, "Baby, what are the numbers?" And then he would compare his restaurant that was most close to that restaurant. I had multiple locations. They had multiple locations. And he'd be like, "Oh, you did 1,000 more. Oh, we did 1,000 more." Like, and just always comparing the numbers. And I think that we had a very lovingly competitive relationship. I felt most bad for the siblings that were not in the restaurant business at like Christmas or the holidays, because it's just the conversation just degrades to like interchange on credit cards and staff stealing and how bad the workforce is. And so that becomes the family conversation. And now it's the same, but with farming. So it used to be restaurants, and now the family that's not in the restaurant, the family that's not in the farming business, the whole conversation kind of degrades to that every holiday.
So how did you move away from the restaurants, Ryland, and because you're living on Sovereignty Ranch now, right?
Yeah. So I moved away from the restaurants because, I had built this nonprofit. I had other people running it. I was sort of the main driver of fundraising and, engagement and bringing people into that nonprofit and supporting it, but I wasn't running it. And so I was still working in the restaurants. But at that point I had been, I was training new staff, how to come into the workforce and sort of the culture of the business and the values and ethics of the company. And I was, one, not really that inspired about the vegan component of the business. And I felt a little bit like I was still just hiding out in this comfortable role in the family business, and that I needed to sort of really, take the torch and lead the charge with Kiss the Ground. And, so ending up basically leaving the restaurant business, going in to be the executive director of the Kiss the Ground the same year that the film came out in 2020, and did that for about 3 years. And then, kind of had a life falling apart with COVID and, the sort of social justice, woke culture that really started to emerge in the nonprofit world. And that led to sort of me feeling like I didn't even belong in my own nonprofit. I had some health challenges, ended up, basically replacing myself with a new CEO, because I couldn't, one, there was a level of inability to take the nonprofit to the next level, and just a social dynamic of suffering and power struggle and, board organization, that, yeah, just led me to feel like I needed to get out. And so that ended up being sort of my pathway to where I got involved in, working on the Bobby Kennedy campaign, and got me, into more politics in this, last election cycle. Not because I was necessarily into politics, but yeah, I've always sort of, my life is always about championing some higher ideal or some higher possibility, and that became, him running for president became the thing that I was championing. Whether he started as a Democrat and then went independent, and then ended up, getting into the White House through, his collaboration and partnership with Donald Trump. That was, I saw an opportunity specifically for the mission of regeneration, and that, I was always looking for what is the, the opening for transformation. And, over years of interacting with Bobby, I got that he got the regenerative ag thing, and, he could be our great ally in that. And, even with all the challenges and disappointments of this administration, I still feel like he does have our back, and, there is an opportunity for, the government to play a role in hopefully, whether it's moving the conversation, moving dollars, moving policy. It's yet to be seen how that will actually be played out in implementation. But I do believe that, yeah, and that's kind of where American Regeneration comes into play, is this new organization entity that was started, last year, between Kelly Ryerson, also known as Glyphosate Girl, who's going to be one of the speakers at the conference, the American Regeneration. But she's been one of the, foremost voices in educating about the human toxicity and harms of glyphosate can, do to our sperm count, to our children's health, to reproductive productivity, and through her own challenging experience of having a health crisis with glyphosate, or with wheat, which she discovered was not wheat, was glyphosate on wheat. And so, yeah, she was also working inside of the Bobby Kennedy, campaign or ecosystem, supporting him. And then my long-term relationship with Rick Clark, after him being a part of Common Ground and that film, and him being someone who I admired, we kind of put together this organization between the three of us to facilitate the best practitioners in regenerative ag, and how do we influence this this administration, and specifically this MAHA coalition and MAHA energy and direction of how to make America healthy. And obviously, for years, knowing that health doesn't start even in the kitchen, it starts I mean, it does start in the kitchen, but it also starts on the farm and on the landscape before the kitchen. And so seeing that there's an opportunity here.
So since Ryland's been trained in the political sphere now, Mollie, I want to get your initial reaction or gut reaction. How do you feel like, with RFK being in the position that he's in, we're a year into this administration, a little bit over a year now. From your perspective, and then I'll get Ryland's afterwards.
It's
How do you feel like it's gone?
It's funny because I've always been more interested about politics, like just the way my brain works. I want to know, like I carry a lot of like information in my mind and I want to know details. And so I've always been more following politics than him. So it's funny now that he's like deep into politics. And I am not deep into politics. I'm pretty disenchanted with all politics altogether. I'll acknowledge that I was tricked by Obama, and I thought that like Obama was actually going to be good, and I'll acknowledge that was a thing. And then I haven't really ever believed or had faith in any politician ever since then. I voted for Trump because like it was the better bad, and I really voted for Trump because the RFK component and the no war component. And his first administration, he did a really good job of not expanding our war footprint. And I felt like that was really valuable as a mother. I really think it's important that we don't send our sons and daughters to die in far off places. And so right now where we stand, where glyphosate is I understand why strategically it is important, but it didn't have to get that kind of liability shield production stuff in the language, us going to war, us that, $800,000 for regenerative agriculture, but where is it? I feel pretty disenchanted, but it's not just this administration. I feel like government and the ever expansion of government is our problem. The ever expansion of subsidies, the ripple effect of those subsidies down the line are never positive. We can go all the way back to the original Farm Bill, and what we wanted people to be healthy enough to go to war because people were starving. And so we added in food stamps and lunch programs. And now we have less people that are healthy enough to go to war, but all the way on the other side, metabolically, completely falling apart. And so, I feel like we just swing. And the problem, like you and I, we have businesses and we have to adapt and we have to do things and we have to work long hours and we have to survive. And because the market is dictating what we have to do, right? But in government, they just sign a paper and then print more money. And so these things can just go and go and go and cause so much harm that to me, it's like we don't know any of these policies can really do good long term. So I really feel like we have to unwind that. And I don't know how to do that. But I really think, what Joel talks about, the emancipation of the food system, just like unwinding that and letting people feed each other has to be the policy. If the policy is not like getting more government out of our business, then I can't imagine that the long-term results are not bad. Like every safety policy that we've put in has made us have more shelf-stable, more safe food because it has no bacteria, but then it's also making us sicker. Like the unforeseen circumstances of every government policy we can look over the last 100 years has really not manifested in something that was positive for humanity, for soil, and for nutrient density. And so I have lost faith that the government is the answer. But I also have lost a little bit of faith in humanity caring about it. I feel like I'm screaming into the abyss every day, writing articles, talking to Instagram, going on podcasts. And I did a talk that happens every month in Houston this last week for the Kappas, which I guess is a fraternity. Not a single Kappa showed up. Other people showed up, a senator and blah, blah, blah. Some people showed up to hear me talk, but it was like the Kappa monthly lunch and not a single Kappa cared about regenerative agriculture or our food systems. And this is in an agricultural state, Texas. So I'm concerned on two sides that government policies roll like a snowball and get out of control and harm more than they do good. And I'm also concerned that humanity is so comfortable in the abundance that we perceive around us that we're completely disconnected to the tsunami that is hitting us in the realm of health, soil health, the collapse of the agrarian society, etc.
Yeah, well said. And Ryland, how do you feel, maybe having a little bit more of a view from the inside, or how do you feel like it's gone for the past year? I mean, I'm sure I picture anybody that gets in political office, including the folks who, like RFK, they come in, we have tons of ideas, good ideas. That's the stuff they campaign on. They get into the office, they get shuffled into a separate room, and they're like, all right, so this is what really needs to happen. Like, you can't actually do these things, but like, we can try to, so like, what's your perspective?
Yeah.
And
So
how do we... Hey, eco farmers, this is Taylor Henry with Acres USA. I hope you enjoy this podcast as much as I enjoy interviewing these folks. If you're serious about regenerative agriculture, I've got an incredible resource for you. You need to check out the Acres USA membership and magazine. You farm in the physical world, and you deserve a physical printed magazine to match. Since 1971, Acres USA magazine has been the leading voice in ecological agriculture, delivering the best insights from regenerative farmers, agronomists, and researchers to help you farm profitably without toxic chemicals. Our membership included physical and digital copies of the magazine each month of the year, which has always been a standard for Acres USA, but we wanted to over-deliver on content. When I acquired this business, I was happy to find that we had years of audio files from presentations at our annual EcoAg conference. And guess what? They were all hiding. Well, not anymore. We developed this membership portal that gives you access to the recordings from farmers like Gabe Brown, Gary Zimmer, Joel Salatin, and Mark Shepard. We also include recordings of private events. And finally, if you're like me and you like listening to content, we are now producing a membership-only podcast of each issue of the magazine, so you can consume each article while you're out in the field. And to make things even sweeter, you'll get discounts on books, workshops, and events to keep expanding your knowledge. So are you ready to take your farming to the next level? Join today for a ridiculously low price at eco-farming.com, or see details in the notes.
It started with, getting a call from Callie Mean saying, "Hey, I need to set up a farm day at a regenerative farm, 2 hours from DC, and can you make it happen next Thursday?" And I called a bunch of guys, Steve Groff, Rick Clark, John Kemp. We got a whole thing to happen, and they were going to come, and it was going to be this announcement of how the USDA and HHS was going to be working, working as, interagency together. And, the event got canceled because Steve had a bunch of pictures on the internet of him standing in 10-foot marijuana field. It looked like, but they're real hemp. And so the White House basically canned it because it'll just be, a PR nightmare of Bobby Kennedy, who's already has this, media hit out on him, is now going to be like, now he's, touring pot farms, talking about. So anyways, it was devastating because ultimately it felt like a call of my lifetime of like, oh my God, I'm getting to facilitate a regenerative agriculture learning day for the Secretary of Ag and Kennedy. Didn't happen. Ultimately, that's what's developed, the organization, is to try to facilitate and, do this kind of education. And, ultimately I called Bobby when it got canceled, and he called me back. It's like 8:00 at night. And I was kind of blue in the face because I'd been working 24 hours, like straight to make this happen. And he just said, "Look, Ryland, I'm sorry. And I'm walking a razor's edge. I have the president's trust, and I have the secretary's trust, and I need to move very slowly and strategically, and take the steps that I know I can make, so that I can take the next step. But we're going there. We're going to get there. We're going to take this on, and." So, I've had these moments of, realer conversation with Bobby over the last year, in little tidbits of moments of, getting a moment of his time. And, ultimately, when I got into this, I kind of prepared myself that if I'm going to play the game in politics, you're going to be continuously disappointed of like, wow. And, sort of even getting into it was like, even just the conversations of what are happening around chemtrails, around, even just with the glyphosate, that how many articles have come out about glyphosate in response to that are, probably 10x to what normally comes out in that period of time. So the ability, because again, government can do some certain things, they can allocate some funding, they can, but really we're talking about a cultural arc of change, and that does come through slow education, awareness, and behavioral change, which we know is very, very difficult to make happen, and government usually doesn't do a good job of, but what is happening within the Maha movement and within Bobby Kennedy's leadership is there is conversations that are happening in different sectors of society, and we live in rural, conservative, hill country Texas, and there's a lot of people who are waking up to I don't want seed oils anymore. There's a farmer who's coming to our conference, Mike Thompson, who's a good old boy, cotton farmer from Lubbock who got into soil health probably 5-6 years ago, maybe 10 years ago. But, he is, the epitome of, rural Texas America. And he's like, I don't eat seed oils, refined sugars. And not that that's because of Bobby Kennedy, but there's a lot of people who have been, not really connected to that food is medicine. We come from California, we come from vegan restaurants, and, food is medicine. But I'll say that there's a huge, huge swing on the right and in rural America that this, the fact that Donald Trump and Bobby Kennedy have, this idea, which again, there's lots of counter things that are not Maha that have happened over the last year, but there is a big cultural awakening in sectors of society that were not awake to that are, I see, in a cultural arc of shifting and changing and understanding that there is something wrong with our food system. There was just a study done in Texas of, conservative Republican, voters, specifically women. 74% of them are like, we will vote for politicians who are going to ban or limit the amount of toxic chemicals coming into our food system. And, I would say that wasn't a reality, 2-3 years ago. And that there is a big cultural shift around food and where food comes from and what's put on food and if that's going to make us sick. And again, there's been disappointment still that the cows come home as far as this administration, but I still I went to see Bobby last Thursday at a rally for the whole Real Food campaign with the new food pyramid that they introduced, and I left that night like I'm still Maha, I'm still believing in Bobby, and again. I could be fooling myself and I could be, setting myself up for lots of more disappointment. But ultimately, I've prepared myself that the cultural shift that's happening is more important than really any policy that's gotten put into place or that we've banned, synthetic petrol, food dyes in our food. I do believe. I mean, I don't even think we've seen the ripple effect of what this new food pyramid design is going to be with Whole Foods. I mean, as far as what that creates in demand, that now, every marketplace, every store that carries or that offers SNAP benefits and you can use food stamps, they need to provide twice as much whole food in those retail locations. Like, I don't even know if our systems are ready for that kind of demand. So again, it's infinitely disappointing on certain levels. And, I don't see anything else really happening movement wise that I'm like, yeah, that's going to make a difference. I know that human beings are, difficult. I've, helped run businesses, managing people, organizing people to go in one direction, all row together is very difficult. The ego of the mind of me, my, and so, again, government's definitely not coming to save us, but is there a big opportunity for a big campaign that, guides a healthier food system and a healthier farming system? I hope so. And I'm invested in, being a part of hoping that can succeed.
The journey of trying to eat healthier foods it can be a very complicated one. Sometimes the complication is just as simple as where do you find the right foods? And one of the things that is incredible about Azure is that they've taken that complexity and really simplified it. Everything you get from Azure is, clean food. Just the simplicity of it, to have that is amazing.
For more information, visit azurestandard.com.
Yeah, I
to
agree.
piggyback on that, I mean, I serve here at the restaurant every day. Well, not Mondays, but every day but Mondays. And the people coming in are not lifelong healthy food eaters that are super excited about sourdough bread. They're totally new to this. And I do think, to piggyback on what I said, people are having an awakening about what I put in my mouth has an impact on my body. And I think that people have been in the like food is food and it's all kind of fine and equal for a long time. And I do think that's shifting. I had a heavyset woman come in like almost in tears, and she was like, I mean, they say don't eat tortillas and bread and sugar when you have diabetes, but I really had no idea that I can reverse my diabetes, and I've changed my blood sugar and I'm doing this and this. And she still had a long way to go. But I do think that the conversation in the zeitgeist is having people drink more raw milk, eat less seed oils, make more sourdough bread, and on and on. And so, if nothing else, hopefully there's some longevity before we go to totally sterile as a human race, because people are starting to make choices that ultimately it's not even just us. There was just an article, I mean, just a study that chemical exposure to in rats, one generation, 10 generations down is still that exposure is happening. So the more that we can have ourselves change our mind and try to change what we put in our bodies, what we put on our bodies, doesn't just impact us, but it impacts us generationally.
Yeah, I would agree. The conversation and awareness has definitely increased. And if you were to pick out all the promises that were made by the administration, I would say, RFK's probably tried to keep as many as he possibly could. At least there's action being done. I mean, the new food pyramid is big.
Do you feel a difference in the people that are coming, like direct to consumer purchasing pork from you or beef from you? Or do you see like a uptick in people being more interested in buying direct from consumer in your area?
It seems like it, but it's hard, it's hard to tell if it's just year over year you're naturally growing too, or if it's because of that. I would say, how I gauge how things are going is like just in my sphere of people in our community that I interact with, there's a ton more knowledge and information. They're like people asking me questions like, oh, so you're doing this regenerative ag thing? I've heard about it. Like it seems, people, it's an easy thing for people to get behind. So I would say that way, yes. I think we're fighting with the economic issues as far as people willing to actually, put their money where their mouth is and do those things. Because it's just, we're always going to battle that with, if the economy's not doing well, are people really going to go buy the more expensive option and go out of their way to source it? So I think there's those two things are fighting against each other a little bit. But yeah, I think the general population is at least a lot more aware of it. The conversation's expanded. To me, the food pyramid I always pointed to that as like the most insane thing that we were taught as kids, and at least they've changed that. I think that's a huge step forward.
Yeah.
Yeah. And, what that turns into as far as all procurement within schools, within hospitals, within, military bases, could be pretty consequential, could be pretty huge.
Yeah, we have to, the supply chains are the biggest problem. If the demand increases for the type of food that we're raising, is it going to be our farmers, people who subscribe to Acres that have been doing this for 40 years that'll benefit, or is it going to be the giant corporations that step in and find the cheapest way to get past the test of these types of foods? That's the thing that makes me like, how can Mollie sell, her food in a profitable way, not just running it through a restaurant that she has to also own and manage? Like that's that's the question. Like, how do we get to that point? We talked about it last week, is when you asked me, does your pigs really cost that much for processing? It's like, yeah. And then you're stuck selling pork for, $10 a pound or $8 a pound, and they can go to the grocery
I have
store
to
and get
sell
it.
it for more because I'm like
Yeah.
$5.90 into processing.
But like, you look at the processors that are local, it's like, they're not the ones gouging you. They can barely survive themselves. So it's, the
I know
system is,
someone texted me like, "Don't you think it's so messed up because they know you have to go to USDA, and so they're gouging. They're barely surviving. All the small USDA plants are going out of business. I'm on my third processor since I moved to Texas because they went out of business. It's not because I want to keep changing processors. I'm a complicated person to process for because I bring my own herbs that we grow. I bring organic garlic. I bring all the organic herbs to them, and I bring the organic A2 cheddar for like the jalapeno cheddar sausage. So I have to create a relationship. It's not like I can just walk in the door any processor. I have to be like, so here's the deal. And so I don't want to change. Once I find someone who's willing to accommodate doing my batches totally separate and using my herbs and blah, 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 I want to stick with them, but they keep going out of business. And so I don't think they are the problem either. It's just when you own the whole supply chain, it's different than when you're going and you're paying a small processor, and then that small processor is paying his insurance and his rent and his it's different than when you own the whole chain.
yeah, exactly. It's, that's, if I were to talk to politicians, that would be the thing. I think the awareness is there. The marketplace is there. The buyers are there. But when are farmers actually going to get access to a legitimate line to sell their product and to be able to compete, that's, and be profitable? Because until that conversation changes, like, because that's what I feel. That's where I get disappointed, because I see the messages and I see the comments from even our farmers who, aren't having the financial success or aren't being able to make it, or they have no way to plan or figure out a way to buy this property and then pay for it.
And I
That's
think
the,
that the real issue is the subsidization of corn, soy, and other commodity crops that depreciate the entire system, and so nobody knows the true cost of food. And so then we feel it seems like our $19 bacon is way out of pocket for a pound when you can buy 4 pounds at Costco for that same price. But the high subsidization that we don't necessarily have access to is completely altering the price of everything across the board. And when you think of it, it's like, oh, well, they're just helping the farmers growing corn and soy, so that's a good thing. But it's really suppressing the prices of everything across the board. And so consumers, between the government subsidies and farmers working for free, that because 85% of farmers have an off-farm, full-time off-farm job, which means we're losing money to grow your food. Those two things are huge subsidies that make up different. I've seen different studies that say between 30 and 65% of the true cost of food is being absorbed by government subsidies and by free labor from farmers and their families. So those two things create a market that's very hard for farmers to make a living in the independent sense because we're not competing apples for apples.
yeah, yeah, no question. Yeah, it's the thing I always ask, like, technically we're in this position because of government subsidies and funding. So we might have to get out of the situation with government subsidies and funding. But then that's just,
But how do you do that without collapsing the entire system? And that's what I don't know. I mean, I don't know. That's what I'm looking for. What is the off ramp? How do we disconnect ourselves from the teat of the government, and how do we get we the people to stand up and support that transition? And I don't know the answer. I feel like I scream into the abyss a lot about it, but and I come up with this idea or that idea and try to get them into the zeitgeist, but I don't have the answer, and I don't know that any of us do. But there has to be an off ramp, and I don't know what it is, because we're already in a system that is incredibly fragile and already lost 15% of our farms in the last 8 years. We can't lose another 15%. In the 80s, there was millions of ranchers, and there's like 700,000 now. So we're talking about the collapse and the consolidation. It almost feels surgical and on purpose.
This year's 50th annual Acres U.S.A. EcoA conference was one for the record books, and now you can relive many of the inspiring moments. The 2025 EcoAg recordings are now available for purchase, featuring all keynotes, breakout sessions, and other expert presentations from the nation's leading ecological ag thinkers and practitioners, such as Gabe Brown, Joel Salatin, John Kemp, Nasha Winters, and Dr. Don Huber, and many more. Whether you're a farmer, rancher, educator, or ag professional, these recordings put the best of sustainable agriculture at your fingertips, so you can learn at your own pace, revisit ideas, and take your operation to the next level. Don't miss out. Head to our conference.acresusa.com and get your complete set of the 2025 EcoAg recordings today. Your soil, your farm, and your future will thank you. Yes, that would be one thought for sure. It does feel like that. So I just saw a stat yesterday. In December, it took 75 bushels of corn to pay for 1 ton of NOLA urea. Today, it would take 126 bushels of corn to pay for the same ton of
That was
urea.
from Adam Chappell, right? He put that up.
Adam reposted it. We got it from Josh Linville.
Okay, yeah.
So what that's telling me is we have a 75% increase on fertilizer costs from December, and in December it was a money losing business to raise corn. So what is that going to look like for the next year? And it's going to look like another bailout from the government. So like we have the opportunity in front of us. Like
which is crazy, right? Because the whole like what Mollie just explained pretty articulately, that we've subsidized the sort of floor, in the guise of like we're subsidizing the large majority of agriculture, but by doing that, everyone else that's not in that system is basically what they're selling occurs way too expensive, and so they have no market for it, and it's totally disjointed from the and then but then this current system of the subsidization is still not working.
It still
and now
doesn't
there's
work.
going to be even more money paid into to continue to prop up this system. I mean, it's crazy.
Yeah, I mean, that would be your excuse for a legitimate off-ramp. Like if the government, so like the regenerative ag program, some of the ideas around it make sense. Like 5 years with tracking progress, all those ideas are solid, and you would technically need something like that. I would question how they possibly could manage something like that. But like we have the excuse. Corn and soy has not been profitable now for 3 years. It looks like, again, next year, because of this war, fertilizer is going to go way up. There's no way it's going to be profitable unless corn prices all of a sudden spike. That doesn't seem like it's going to happen. So we have. I mean, that seems like a good enough reason.
In a free market, corn prices, we're supposed to live in a free market. Corn prices should spike. I'm not arguing whether that would be good for the economy.
We produce too much of it.
What?
That's the funny thing. We produce too much of it. That's the excuse why the prices are low.
And 40% of it is going into ethanol, which makes all of our engines run less efficiency. We burn more fossil fuels under the guise of green corn fuel, and then our motors go bad quicker because they're running dry with the ethanol in them, and we burn a higher rate of gasoline because of the ethanol is in it. And then with diesel, we have to add urea to be legally allowed to drive our diesels. It's just they call it DEF. They don't call it urea, but look at how it's made. And so, I mean, it's crazy. 40% of that corn, what if that land was put into diverse crops that could be sown to your community, or put into cattle with a diverse cover crops, and then eventually maybe permanent, natives, or at least perennials, and graze cattle and move the cattle. Like, it's not working. The system is so broken, and that is the floor. And so with that, everything else is broken, is break. It's like a bowling ball that hits the first pin and it just crashes everything else.
Yeah. This is the
Um,
depressing side of this stuff.
let's leave everybody on a good note. I do
Yeah.
need to I have a meeting I have to get to 2 minutes ago, so I have
Okay,
to.
so quickly, let's talk about the event. Why
Yes.
should people come to Sovereignty Ranch? It will be a positive-based event. It's actually, we've talked a lot about policy today. I don't think we'll be covering too much of policy there. My idea and how we combat these fertilizer costs and how we can get farmers profitable is, I think that we have the information in Acres. We've had it for years on how to get away from glyphosate, how to get away from these chemicals, how to use biological approaches to have the same type of yields and have success and become profitable. And I think our speaker lineup is going to talk about that and how people can have success over the next 5 to 10 years in regenerative agriculture and in agriculture in general. So what do you guys think? What's some of the benefits that they're going to get coming to Sovereignty Ranch? It's not in a hotel, it's outside. You're going to see an actual farm that's working, probably eat some of the best food you could possibly imagine, and interact with some of the best people in the nation on regenerative agriculture.
Well, I think that there is people out there that are doing, like you said, are doing it and doing it successfully. And those are the stories that we need to amplify. And so when you look at these farmers that are coming and to train and to do these workshops, they are being successful and doing it the way that is supporting everything from human health to soil health. And then also economically succeeding. And so that is the pathway. And like I said, the government's not going to be it. So it's conferences like this where you can come and you learn from other farmers that are doing it and are succeeding. And there's going to be talks from how you can do the physical doing of it. And then my talk is going to be all about scope versus scale, and how to have all these value added products and use your land, because it's not the world where we can just buy 1,200 acres and run cattle and we can pay the mortgage. That's not the world we're in anymore. So what are these other revenue streams that we can bring into the farm? That's what my talk is going to be about. And then there's going to be, the Rick Clarks of the world that are doing it successfully at scale. And on top of that, you're going to be here on the farm, eating food from the farm, which is normal for all of us, but not everybody gets to just like be on a farm and eat food from the farm. And then we're going to have, demos of butchering, demos of no-till seed drills and how they work, and all of that as well. And so I think it's really going to be a unique learning experience where it's the people that are doing it successfully talking about it. We're going to have the cover crops and the people that sell cover crops and install cover crops doing demos and showing. And so that you can really get not just like what 30-second clips on X, but really we're going to be able to deep dive with these people and get the knowledge transfer person to person, which is what is so important right now and what policy cannot do. And only us, we the people, coming together and sharing that knowledge like our ancestors have done for thousands of years is the way to carry this forward. And so that's what Acres and American Regeneration and Sovereignty Ranch is really wanting to provide with this conference.
Yeah, and I'll just say, Molly answered, I think, the majority of the, what it's going to be. But, the title, American Regeneration, A New American Dream, it's going to be people who are living outside of the mainstream lines and taking an alternative approach to, lifestyle, farming, and, here we are, a brother and sister running, collectively a ranch and, living, side by side and doing family together on a farm with a restaurant with, all these added value things, and, creating a life together and also creating a life of educating others in an inspiring way. And, I think the deep value is going to be the experience of being in community with so many amazing people who are up to unique but aligned things, and feeling encouraged, inspired, and supported by being part of this community and this shared learning experience. So I'm really excited about it. I think it's going to be amazing, and I hope those that are listening come and join us.
Yeah, and I mean, from our perspective of Acres, we love having the Eco Egg Conference. It's awesome. You get, well over 1,000 people all in the same building, but it's in a hotel, and we'll be outside, and you can actually get some visuals and see some of these things take place. With all of our conferences, it's amazing how generous our speakers are, the interactions that you get with them, the one-on-one times that, you pass Rick Clark in a hallway or heading, back and forth from the bathroom, and you get 5 minutes to talk to them. Those are the things I think people walk away with that are the most valuable too. So,
and all the speakers are staying, or a lot of the speakers are staying on site. So what has happened in the past at conferences like this here is you end up with a table with all of these kind of godfathers of this thing sitting around a table with all these newbies that are trying to get into it, sharing a bottle of wine, sharing some nachos, and really deep diving in ways that you can't necessarily in a classroom or whatever. And that is also the beautiful thing about being on a ranch and staying overnight and having these days together, is the in-between times, the jumping in the pond together, or the having a meal together.
Yep, and there's lodging on site, and if the lodging on site's sold out, then a hotel's just on the road. So,
and we also have glamping tents that are available, so you can get those, and they're a little bit more expensive just because the company that brings them in, but you will have everything set up for you, queen beds or double bed, or single beds. And it has a rug, it has a nightstand, it has a lantern, blankets, pillows. So you don't have to bring gear. If you do want to stay, if the hard housing on site sells out, we do have that opportunity as well. And so you don't have to bring any gear. And if you have a family, that's kind of nice as well, because we can set up the glamping tents with 4 single beds, and so that creates space for everybody, or you can just get it with a queen bed. So both those options are available.
Yeah, and like everything with Acres, we try to exchange value by providing a ton of value in return, and the same goes for Mollie and Ryland. All of these things help all of our businesses move forward. You get to eat food at the restaurant, spend money, help Mollie's farm out. You get to help Acres out, and you get to help American Regeneration out. And if you believe in some of our messaging and our missions, these are the things that, like, we put our hand out, let's shake hands and agree that you value exchange money for us, and we give you back a ton of value and information in return. So we appreciate everyone who goes to the events, and we hope to see you at this one.
And thank you, Taylor, for you in the world and what you do, and continuously getting these messages out there. I appreciate you. I appreciate our partnership and you publishing my book and who you are in the world. We're really grateful for you.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I appreciate you guys too. All right, get to that meeting. All right, that wraps up this episode of the podcast. Thanks for tuning in and being part of a growing community committed to soil health, land stewardship, and ecological agriculture. Find us on Spotify, Apple, Google Play, and all other trusted podcast platforms. Give us a follow, give us a like. Acres U.S.A. is North America's oldest publisher on production scale organic and regenerative farming. For more than 50 years, our mission has been to help farmers, ranchers, and market gardeners grow food profitably, regeneratively, and with nature in mind. A big thank you to our podcast sponsors, Azure Standard and American Farmland Trust, for supporting these conversations and helping us to spread the information and message of ecological farming. If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to subscribe, leave a review, and share it with someone who cares about the future of farming. We'll see you next time on the Acres USA podcast.